You are in the middle of a serious argument. The emotional stakes are high, the volume is rising, and you can actually feel the muscles in your neck begin to stiffen as the person across the table leans in. Then they drop the bomb. They use a single extreme word. They tell you that you always do this, or that you never listen. Your focus shifts instantly. You stop processing their feelings. Your brain latches onto their choice of vocabulary, and you pivot to attacking the exact phrasing of their sentence. While this reaction looks like a petty deflection, your visceral recoil likely serves as a biological defense mechanism against flawed reality processing. In a high-stakes emotional fight, pausing to argue over semantics usually looks like immaturity or evasion. It feels like a cheap tactic to avoid the real issue. However, your brain is prioritizing the mathematical parameters of the reality being presented over the emotional core of the argument. Neurologists identify this as cognitive friction, the physical resistance your brain generates when forced to process data that lacks logical consistency. When the brain encounters these errors, cognitive friction halts your ability to empathize. You find it physically impossible to listen to the other person until the logical error is resolved. This intense annoyance functions as a highly tuned neurological alarm system, detecting a mathematical fallacy in real time. Behavioral science reveals a deep divide in how different human brains organize the chaos of the world. The absolute mind seeks safety in chaos by flattening nuance. It slams these hundreds of complex data points of human behavior into a single, rigid, black and white vertical bar of certainty. Contrast this with the probabilistic engine, the natural operating state for high IQ thinkers. This brain views reality as a spectrum of likelihoods, using dynamic curves and shaded regions of variance to map behavior. Notice how these curves continuously pulse and adapt as new data appears. The probabilistic engine runs constant background calculations on varying outcomes, meticulously accounting for margins of error with every new piece of information. High-level cognitive intelligence relies on the capacity to accurately map the full spectrum of possible outcomes, rather than searching for a single absolute answer. This probabilistic model explains exactly why the words always and never cause such a violent reaction. For a brain wired to calculate variance, absolute terms represent a mathematical impossibility. Human behavior rarely occurs in 100% or 0% increments. Your brain is constantly running a background check, asking itself one question: what are the odds I am mistaken? An absolute statement demands a 100% probability requirement. This forces a sudden crash in your nuanced calculation systems, as the data simply doesn't fit the reality you've mapped. The frustration is the literal friction of a precision instrument being forced to process blunt, inaccurate data. The argument itself becomes secondary to a deeper conflict, the visceral experience of interacting with a brain lacking the resolution to process reality with precision. This creates intellectual isolation. You are standing in a world of complex probabilities, while they insist on a flat, two-dimensional drawing of the same reality. Recognizing this mismatch changes how you can handle your next interpersonal conflict. When you hear an extreme, absolute word, try dropping your defensive posture. You can shift from viewing the interaction as a hostile conflict to observing it as an instance of cognitive translation failure. You and your partner are often fundamentally speaking two different cognitive languages. This frustration represents the heavy burden of perceiving the gray area in a world desperate for black and white.